Hola, hola. Hello, hello. Bienvenidos. Hello to Mexico Relocation Guide. Today's live stream is to help answer some of your questions about moving to or living in Mexico. I see some of you guys have showed up early. Thank you so much for showing up early and giving me already some of your questions. We're definitely going to try to get to as many questions as possible, but I want to give a chance for people to join us if you haven't. If this is your first time ever watching a Mexico Relocation Guide live stream, my name is Mariana, and I do these live streams to try to help you understand what things are like with the residency process, what some of the things with rentals are, like some of the questions you should ask, some common scams to avoid, and a lot of just important information on what you can expect when you move to Mexico. So that way you can avoid the least, or you can have the least amount of surprises, and you can avoid the most you can avoid having frustrations when you actually move to Mexico. So thank you so much for being here. I would love for you to tell me where you guys are watching from. If you're in North United States or even in Colorado, I see that you guys are having some crazy temperatures. So I hope that you're staying warm. I would love to know what you guys are doing for Christmas. So go ahead and start chatting in and let us know where you're watching from. I see some of our promoters here. Hi, Tony. So nice to see you. Feliz Navidad. Um, let's see. Buenas noches, Andres. Thank you so much for being here. Wisconsin. Hello. How's the weather in Wisconsin right now? Lake Chapala. Okay, yeah, we're gonna cover some of the information on this live stream on Lake Chapala because we have a lot of videos coming up recently or coming up for Lake Chapala. So we're all gonna we're gonna have some of those on our channel soon. Los Angeles, Alberta, Orlando, Sunahihik. That's awesome, Debbie. Hi, Denise. Thanks for being here. Las Vegas, Texas. I love the spelling of Texas. Denver, Catherine. How are you doing? Are you staying warm? Tucson, Ontario. Originally from Virginia, now in Southwest Florida. Well, I bet you're really happy you're not in Virginia right now. Hola from San Miguel de Allende. It's relatively cold here too, in the 30s. Yeah, that is very chilly in San Miguel de Allende. It's not typical for sure. So I think the cold is definitely affecting more than just the United States. Let's see, Arizona, Philadelphia, Nicaragua. Well, thank you so much for being here, you guys. I see so many of you. Thank you so much. I'm going to get started. That way we can take advantage of all the time that we have together today. So I want to point out a couple of things first before we get started with questions, because I think I talk a lot about residency, and maybe I haven't done a really good job of explaining some of the things that we talk about, because, we talk about it on a surface level. In the online guide, we go into much greater detail, but I think it's good to clarify some things from time to time. So I have some notes here. So if you see me go look on the side, it's because I'm reading some of my notes. So these are a couple of misconceptions or mistakes, right, that I see all the time on different Facebook groups, on different areas of blogs, and different posts that I see all over wherever you guys are reading your information from. So I want to clarify some of these misconceptions, and these are all related to residency. Starting with, there's no guarantee that if you qualify for permanent residency that you will get permanent residency at your Mexican consulate. The consulate has the final say on what residency you will receive. So just don't get upset, right? It's not a big deal. If you can always get permanent residency after 4 years as a temporary resident. Just know that you will have to be in Mexico to renew your temporary residency after the first year, and then you can renew it for an additional 3 years, so that you don't have to, if you aren't actually living in Mexico permanently, then you have to be back to do that, but you can renew it for an additional 3 years. Which brings me to my next one, which is, do you have to live in Mexico to remain a resident? And the short answer is no. You don't have to actually live in Mexico to remain a resident. However, because there are a lot of people that don't have a long-term rental or a long-term home in Mexico yet, maybe because, you're not planning to move for another 2 months or 2 years, right? Like you're planning ahead, and you should be, because you should get residency while you can qualify for it. I'm a big promoter of that. But if you use an Airbnb or hotel address when you do your canje, which is the second part of the process in Mexico, it is your responsibility to change your address with INM within 90 days of you finding a permanent home or a long-term rental. Meaning that if you do your canje and you use your Airbnb address and then you leave, it is your responsibility that when you come back and you find a long-term rental, if it's not in that same city that you did your canje in, then you have to change your address with INM. And I mention this because even though it is rare, INM can do random home checks. And if they do a home check and they find out that you are not living in the address that you set down in your application, then you can get fined, or you can get in even further trouble, like getting your visa revoked, which you definitely want to avoid. I will say it's very rare that this happens. In the 2 years that we've been doing this, we've never heard of anybody actually getting penalized, like getting deported or having their visa revoked. But it can happen. So I want to set the expectation straight that if you use an Airbnb address or a hotel address, you can absolutely do that. But just know that you should be looking to change that address with INM in the future when you find a long-term solution. Another thing is, if you're applying as a married couple, some consulates will require each one of you to qualify independently. So, let's just use Arizona as an example, because Arizona has, publicized their income requirements for 2023, and that's $3,000 a month minimum, right, for temporary residency. It goes up from there depending on the type of either financial statements that you're bringing or the type of residency visa that you're applying for. But let's just use the temporary as an example. So you have to make at least 3,000 US dollars a month to qualify for temporary residency. And in some cases, I don't know what Arizona requires for married couples, but there are some consulates that require each applicant to prove that they make at least 3,000 US dollars. Now, don't worry. If this is your case and only one of you qualifies and you're married, then one of you should go ahead and apply for temporary residency, and then you can petition your spouse from within Mexico under a family unification law that allows you to basically ask for or petition a family member, a direct family member, without them having to prove additional income or additional funds, right? So one of you qualifies, go ahead and do it, and then you can petition for your spouse. Another thing is, when you are approved at a Mexican consulate, you're going to receive a stamp on your passport. That's known as like your pre-approval, right? And it'll say on there that you have up to 180 days. Like it'll say when you got it, when it was given to you, and then when it expires, which is 180 days. So just know that you have up to 180 days to come to Mexico and finish that process, which is known as canje. So you'll hear me use that term a lot. That's the process that we're talking about when you exchange that stamp into a residency card. The canje is a process that, you basically turn in this stamp from the passport into a card, and then your card actually becomes your residency. So you're not fully done with the process until you've done your canje. Now, once you actually enter Mexico so you have 180 days to come to Mexico, but then once you enter Mexico, you have up to 30 days to start the process. So let's say you're driving or let's say you're flying. Once you actually enter Mexican territory, you get 100 or 30 days to be able to start the canje process. If you're driving across the border, it is your responsibility to stop at the immigration office and ask for an FMM. And the FMM has to say canje, and it has to have 30 days written on it, because you will need that piece of paper to actually do your canje. If you don't stop at the immigration offices and you just drive on to Mexico, and let's say you're going to Mexico City, it would be let's say you're going to Merida, right? Like you're going all the way south. It would be such a bummer for you to have to go all the way back to the border to have to get an FMM. So just know that you're going to need this piece of paper for you to do canje. So don't forget to stop at immigration if you're driving. If you're flying, you can't cross into Mexico without actually getting this piece of paper. So just know that there are some safeguards in place for you to not forget about it. The other thing is you might get asked to bring financials to renew your temporary residency. This isn't uncommon. It's not very common, but it isn't uncommon either. There are a couple of offices in Mexico, INM offices, that require you to bring statements or financial statements, documents, right? Stating that you have at least some available income to you when you go to renew. And I don't want you to freak out. I don't want you to think like, well, I might not have that same income, 2-3 years down the line when I go to renew, or 1 year down the line when I go to renew, if it's your first time getting a temporary. And that's perfectly understandable. I've also never heard of anybody getting denied because they didn't have a certain amount of income. I don't think they're looking for a specific income. It might depend on the city that you're renewing at, of course, but it's more important that they know that you have some income available to you, that you're not running on zero, right? And that if they're going to renew your residency, that you have some funds available to you, which I'm sure everybody does, right? Like, otherwise, how are you living in Mexico? What you get at the Mexican consulate is what you get in Mexico. So this means that if you got temporary, right, as your pre-approval at the Mexican consulate that you applied in, that means that you can't request permanent residency once you get to Mexico and try to do your canje. There have been some questions about that. And the only way that you can change from temporary to permanent residency from within Mexico is either by completing 4 years of a temporary residency, or meeting the financial requirements to become a permanent resident, and then you can ask to switch that residency visa type to a permanent resident. All temporary residencies, except for the special regularization program, which I will get to in a second, all temporary residencies are for 1 year initially. After the first year, you can renew for 1 additional year, 2 additional years, and 3 additional years, right? So a total of 4 years is what you could get your temporary residency for. And you can only be a temporary resident for up to 4 years, at which point you have to either switch that to permanent residency, or you have to go back to your country and start the process again. And why, you may ask, some people would want to do that. That's if you have like a foreign plated car and you're trying to get that temporary import permit extended. Well, you can only get that temporary import permit for the length of your residency visa. Permanent residents cannot have a foreign plated car in Mexico once they have their residency card, because essentially you're permanent, right? You're indefinite. And the temporary import permit is temporary. You can import a car. It depends on the age of the vehicle. You're looking at $2,000 to $8,000, depending on the age of the vehicle. This is a big one. So a lot of you might be, traveling to Mexico during the holidays because you want to take advantage of doing your canje while you're also vacationing, which I think is a great idea. You should know that I&M closed its doors on December 16th, and they will not reopen until January 2nd. So if you're working with a facilitator, I'm sure they've told you this already, but you will have to wait until January 2nd to get anything done with I&M. And once you get your visa stamped on your passport and you start the canje process, you need to finish that process in Mexico the next time you come to Mexico. So if you are trying to you're like, I don't know that I want to do canje yet because I don't know how long it'll take, and I just want to come to Mexico and vacation first. Well, when you enter Mexico, you have to do canje. Like, you can't come in as a tourist and then go back and then try to come back in as canje. So that's another big thing. Big thing also, when you start your canje process, you have to get your residency card before you can leave Mexico. Or you can leave Mexico while you're in the process of canje, as long as you get an exit and reentry permit. And these are usually given to people in special circumstances when they can prove that maybe there's like a medical emergency or some sort of financial burden that they need to go back to, maybe a job, things like that. And you're given 60 days to leave Mexico while you're in the process of canje and then come back. And the reason some people do this is because I&M is very backed up right now with appointments. Some offices are faster than others, but the majority of offices can take up to 2 weeks for you to get your residency card. So if you're in Mexico waiting for those 2 weeks or waiting for your appointment and you need to go back home for whatever reason, you need to get a reentry permit, an exit and reentry permit. If not, you basically have given up on your residency and you would have to start the process again, which you definitely don't want to do. So why do I bring this up? Well, you can ask any local or any foreigner living in Mexico. Mexican bureaucracy is not the easiest to navigate. And sometimes it depends on which office you're working with, which officer you're talking to, which agent. It can vary on the day of the week. And unfortunately, right, it's not always so black and white. It can be inconsistent. So that's why I think hiring an immigration facilitator will be the best money you ever spend. They are wonderful resources. Not all of them are created equal, though. There are reputable ones, and then there are scammers. So you have to be careful with those. If you get our relocation guide, we obviously give you access to the ones that we know are not scammers, are reputable, trustworthy, and they know their stuff. So, you have the highest chance of being successful in your residency. Okay, so let's get started. I know you guys have some questions. If you have any questions about what I just mentioned, feel free to put it in the live chat. So, thank you so much, Dale, for being here. You want to buy a house near Lake Chapala. A recent MRG YouTube video suggested needing cash in hand to buy a house the day you see it. The guide suggested a much longer time. Is the Hahihik housing market that hot? I know exactly what you're talking about. We did a video with Araceli Kopiloff, and she mentioned, she's seen houses sell the same day. I definitely think there is some truth to that, but I also think it depends on the price of the home, right? If it's priced really well, then yes, I think and by really well, I mean really attractive, right? For people coming, especially from certain parts of the United States where the housing market is crazy. And then, they spend that same money in Ajijic and they can get a much nicer house and their property taxes are basically nothing a year. So I think it can be very hot. I also think it depends on the time of the year. In the winter, it's definitely a hotter time than other times of the year. And I also think that because there's an influx of foreigners, the markets will change. So sometimes it'll be really hot, and sometimes it might not be as hot as other months. Although the Lake Chapala area in general is probably the most sought after expat community in all of Mexico. So it's probably going to be a hotter market there than anywhere else in Mexico, other than maybe like Puerto Vallarta or other areas. But because it's also very small, there's a much higher demand than there is inventory. Now, regarding cash in hand, I think it also depends, right? There is financing. Like, I don't want anybody to think that you absolutely need cash to buy a house in Mexico. That is the norm because interest rates through traditional financing in Mexico are very high. And that's if you qualify, which you normally have to have like some credit in Mexico, either because you were employed or because, you have to have some credit history. So not everybody can get financing. There is a company that will finance if you are an American citizen or resident. It's called Moxie Mortgages, and they are based out of California, and they do finance for U.S. residents and citizens who have like a pretty good FICO score. Like they'll finance your property in Mexico. It does have to be over a certain amount, and then they do require certain things from that property. It has to be like, I don't think it can be new construction. It has to be like an established home. Some other things you have to check on their website because some of these things may have changed. But for the majority of people who are looking to buy a home in Mexico, they either get financing from the builder if they are, buying pre-construction, and there are benefits to that. Like you can find a house that's because you're financing the project, sort of say, then you basically get a lower rate than if the house was already built and they're trying to sell it to a brand new buyer. And, their financing is usually pretty good depending on the builder. There is seller financing, right? Like if you can agree to the terms of that with a lawyer and that you're pretty comfortable that you're going to pay a certain amount and the seller's okay with that, then there is seller financing too. But I would say the majority of people pay cash. So it just depends on the area, of course. JD, thanks so much for being here. Is Monterrey, Mexico a good place to live? I mean, I know plenty of people who would say yes. I think this is very subjective, though, and I think it fully any place that somebody tells you like, yes, I think it's a good place to live. I think it fully depends on that person. Nobody's going to experience a place like you will. So I highly encourage you to scout Monterrey if you're considering it. The water situation there has gotten better, but it's not perfect. So you should know that they had like a pretty bad water crisis this year. So something to be mindful about. There is one of our really, really awesome friends, Ernie from Retired Life in Mexico, No Bull, lives in Monterrey. So I suggest watching his channel and reaching out to him and asking him his thoughts. I definitely think Monterrey is a great city. It has a lot going on for it. Because it's so close to the United States, it does have a lot of like the US culture. However, uh, even though it is close to the United States, there's actually very little people that speak English in Monterrey. So if you're fluent in Spanish or at least know the basics, I think it would be great for you. Hi, Debbie. Thanks so much for being here. You're looking into Puerto Vallarta, but not on the beach. I was hoping something safe within walking distance of groceries and other supplies I may need. You're turning 68 soon. Congratulations, and you won't have a car. There's many areas in Puerto Vallarta that I think would be good for you. I did make a video on an expat who was living there, lives in the romantic zone, and he talks about walking everywhere. So I think the romantic zone is very common or very popular because of this, right? A lot of people know it as an area where you can easily get a taxi, but it's also very walkable because everything is nearby. However, that does come with a price. Rentals are usually a little bit higher in that area. So I have a video coming up very soon. I'm editing it right now. I'm adding the final touches. It will be available after the first of the year, and it's all about Puerto Vallarta. So it covers neighborhoods, cost of living, some rental examples, things to do, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you're really going to like it, Debbie. I'd highly suggest that you come back and check it out. Feliz Navidad, Bill. Thanks so much for being here. You're wrapping presents. That's awesome. What are you getting your kids? What are you getting your family? Hi, Nemo. Do you know the rules about bringing in a cargo trailer, either as a temporary resident or a visitor? If it's registered as an RV, is that better? So if you're bringing in a trailer with your car, that is considered its own like vehicle. So you have to get a temporary import permit for either one. I know that an RV you can bring in for up to 10 years on the temporary import permit, which is awesome. Because if you do have an RV, that's great. You don't have to basically import it after your 4 years as a temporary are up. But yeah, I have that information in our online guide. I also have it, I'm pretty sure, on our website. I would say my biggest advice for anybody who's looking to get a temporary import permit is get it at the border, because you have to verify your FMM regardless, your forma migratoria múltiple, or this is either your visitor pass or your canje pass. And if you're coming in for canje, then I recommend doing it at the border. Now, if you're a regular resident, then you can do it ahead of time. I think you can do it up to a month in advance. But I would really suggest not doing it that far in advance, because you never know. Your car might be, something might happen to your car while you are waiting for that date to come up. Or, you might have a change of plans and then you can't get your money back. So I would really suggest just doing it maybe the day before, or a couple of days before your actual planned trip, or doing it at the border. And I think I'm not alone in that. A lot of people suggest the same thing. People that we work with that drive back and forth to Mexico and the US and Canada on a regular basis. So um, I hope that helps. Hi, Roosevelt. Thank you so much for being here. Your condo's being built. Congratulations. It's going to be ready in December of 2023, I assume, or the 23rd. It's going to be available tomorrow or in 2023. I think you mean 2023, but I don't want to assume anything, because you say you have to complete canje by June 16th. Can you use a condo address on your canje application, as it will be? Yeah, absolutely. You should. Um, Again, on the rare chance that somebody does a house check, you definitely want to make sure that it's your long-term rental versus your short-term rental, right? So if you're getting an Airbnb and you're not moving for another 6 months or a year, when you move, you definitely want to make that change with INM as soon as possible, so that you avoid any chance of getting in trouble down the line. Hi, thank you so much for being here, badass black sheep. Um, how long are the usual wait times in Puerto Vallarta to get an immigration appointment for the temporary visa card if you already have the consulate stamp? It varies throughout the year, but the last I heard, and right now they're closed until the second. So assuming that all the stars align and everything is fine in Puerto Vallarta, it's taking people around 2 weeks to do the whole canje process because they have to send everything to Guadalajara and then Guadalajara has to send it back. So, in my opinion, if you're flexible and it's better for you, go to Guadalajara. I mean, there's an international airport there, aside from Puerto Vallarta, that you can directly fly into, assuming that you're coming from one of the major cities. And we have a variety of immigration facilitators that we recommend that work in Guadalajara, are very efficient, very fast, very friendly, and know their stuff. So, and because they have to, and because that's like the main office in the state of Jalisco, it'll be a faster turnaround time for you. So I hope that helps. Hi, Karen. I want to live in Puerto Morelos for 1 year beginning November 1st, 2023. What kind of permit or visa do I need? You will need either a temporary or a permanent residency visa. The way you know is based on either income requirements or other requirements like age. Like I mentioned before, though, whatever the consulate gives you is what you get. So even if you qualify for permanent residency, that doesn't guarantee that you will get permanent residency. Some consulates also want you to be over 60 or want you to be drawing a pension or Social Security for them to give you residency. So just FYI. All right, let's see. What other questions do we have here? Thank you all so much for being here. Hi, Daryl. Thanks so much for being here. You recently stated that you will put out info about every consulate in the USA, at least on minimum required income. Will it also give the requirements from each consulate and the easiest consulate to use? No, because that information changes very often. So it would just, I would be doing you a disservice by telling you that that's going to be up to date every week, and it's not. So I would hate to give you that expectation. But the income requirements usually are solidified at the beginning of the year, and they don't change. So it's going to include income requirements. And then if you want to know like little tidbits of information like that, I'd suggest joining these live streams the next year because, that's timely information that I share usually as it's happening this week. But no, I'd stay away from putting out information that's so granular like that because if you're reading it a month later and I haven't changed it for whatever reason because I didn't know it had changed or whatever the reason is I haven't changed it, then you're already getting wrong information. So I'd hate to do that to you. I do always say that, we give general guidelines, and I always tell all of our audience and our customers, like, please double check with your local consulate, especially if you have to travel there and the travel time is more than an hour. I would hate for you to get there and be surprised about something that you could have found out beforehand. So no, it's not going to include that granular of information, but I do promise to share that information if I know it on these live streams. All right, let's see. Freezing cold here in Wisconsin. Lots of snow, blowing winds, bad storm right now. Oh, I'm sorry. Can't wait for no more nieve. Yeah, no more nieve to you. Seriously. Um, I hope that it stops for you or you move to Mexico sooner rather than later. I'm checking to see which are comments and which are just questions. We are working on our permanent residency, but we'll only have about 1 month to do our canje. Is there a better INM office to be sure that is enough time to complete the process? Hi, Teresa. Well, again, I'm going to reiterate what I just mentioned earlier that yes, you can go to a different office. And I certainly think that you should if you don't have enough time to stay in that office for whatever reason that you have to go back to the country that it is you're traveling from. However, you do have to know that it is your responsibility to make that change of address with INM within 90 days of you actually moving. So if you have no intention of living in a specific city, like let's say you go and do your canje in Mexico City, right? Let's just give that as an example. But you have no intention of living there. One, I would never mention that to an INM agent because they're going to tell you, well, go do your canje in the city that you intend to live in. And second of all, you should know that it is your responsibility to change that address later on in life, right? As soon as you move and you have a long-term rental. There are some offices that are faster than others. Currently, the speediest offices are Merida, Los Cabos, Tijuana, and assuming that they don't run out of plastic, and assuming that there isn't a change somewhere in INM where they have to send something to a new office, or there isn't a change in agents, or assuming that all the stars align, these are the fastest offices. Mexico City, Puebla, Guadalajara, and you can count on basically the major cities being pretty fast, which is best for you if you're traveling internationally and you want to have the most direct route, so it avoids you spending more money on hotels and transportation and things like that. Huatulco, I believe, is still on that list, and those are the ones that come top of mind to me. La Paz might be on that list too. So just FYI, those are some of the fastest offices. I always highly recommend, if you can, travel to Mexico City. Just know that Mexico City is probably the busiest office. Maybe Playa del Carmen is actually the busiest office, or Cancun, or somewhere in the Riviera Maya. But maybe Mexico is a very close second. So I would say, if you can travel to, and Playa del Carmen takes a while. It takes like 2 to 3 weeks for you to get your canje done. So if you're on a time crunch and you don't want, you want to have something a little bit more for sure, then I would say Mexico City. And Mexico City has, the busiest airport. So I would just say that would probably be your best bet. Hi, Bill. Okay, how quickly could a non-retired couple obtain their canje for permanent residency once they are in Mexico? That is, how long of a stay in Mexico should we plan for once pre-approved for residency? Again, it just depends on the INM office that you're going to be applying at. For example, Puerto Vallarta can take 2 weeks. San Miguel de Allende can take 2, 3, 4 weeks. Querétaro can also take 2, 3, 4 weeks. It just really depends on the INM office that you're going to. And the reason why different INM offices take longer than others is a variety of reasons, right? The number one is they don't have online appointments anymore, so you actually have to show up and make an appointment in person. And some offices only allow like 10 appointments a day. So if you're like number 11 waiting in line, like you're out of luck. You have to come back tomorrow and wait in the same line, and hopefully you're one of the first 10. And or a variety of other things, like only Mondays and Wednesdays do they do canje. So each office has its own weird quirks. So it really depends on which INM office you're going to. And hopefully what I answered to Teresa helps you out in that decision. And keep in mind that can change. So just because Merida is fast right now does not mean that Merida will be fast in January, or that Mexico City is fast right now does not mean that Mexico City will be fast in January, et cetera, et cetera. Right? All right. Let's see. Oh, thank you. The backdrop is because I'm not in my house, so I'm traveling, and therefore it's very messy behind me, and I don't want you guys to see that. But don't you love my new house? Yeah, this is a good question, Michelle. So, what if you make less than $3,000 a month but have $200,000 in the bank? So, you can qualify for residency either through financial solvency on a monthly income basis or through investment slash savings. For 2022, I want to address 2022 because even though we know what Arizona's doing, we don't know what the rest of the consulates are going to be doing in 2023. And I am working on getting that information to you guys. But because it's still 2022, let's cover 2022 prices. So currently, right, if you're getting temporary, For most of the consulates in the United States, you have to make at least 2,600 US dollars. In Arizona, we already know it's going to be 3,000 in 2022. Or you have to make about $43,000 in savings, and you have to prove that for the last 12 months. That number is scheduled or expected to go up in 2023. And we're expecting that to be around $52,000 in savings for the last 12 months. Now, depending on the consulate that you apply at, some consulates will want to see 12 months of bank statements and nothing else. Some consulates will want to see 12 months of bank statements and the investment accounts you have. They might want to get like a letter from an employer stating that you have an employee, that you have employment and that you will continue having employment in Mexico after you have moved to Mexico, even if you are applying the savings route or the investments route. So it truly depends on which consulate you're going to be applying at, because each consulate also operates completely independently, and most of them have the same general guidelines. However, some of them do vary on these little things like, if you're married, each one of you having to qualify independently. If you are going the investments route, whether they just will take your investments or whether they want some additional documentation. If you're a solopreneur, if you're an entrepreneur and you own your business, they might want more information regarding that, like, your LLC, any tax payments you have done. If you have current projects, they might want a letter from those vendors, right, stating that you pay them X amount. So just know that each consulate has very specific requirements. They all use about the same guidelines, but they do have their own little specific requirements. So that's why I think it's best to reach out to that consulate directly if you're not going to be working with a facilitator. If you are working with a facilitator, they usually will do some of that research for you, depending on the facilitator, obviously. But most of the ones that we recommend will do some of that research for you. So they'll tell you exactly like, hey, this consulate will want you to bring XYZ to get you as prepared as possible. I hope that answers your question. And Little Digger, it sounds like this is exactly your question. So I hope that that also helps you out in determining whether you qualify or not. Susan, thanks so much for being here. How can I get help with prepping my papers for the Denver consulate? They are closed right now and pretty overwhelmed. Who can I hire to prep the paperwork required in Spanish? Been trying for months. I'm sorry. Yeah, sometimes getting that consulate appointment or getting in touch with the consulate can be the hardest part of the whole process. I will say this, if you're working with a consulate in the United States, the entire paperwork can be done in English. They do have the application form in English. If not, you can go to our website, mexicorelocationguide.com/, Mexico resident visa. And I'll put it in the comments right now. But we have a guide on how to apply for residency, and I have the form on that blog post. All the staff, if you're working in the United States or Canada, the staff speaks English. So the US part, the reason why you would want to hire a facilitator to help you on the US part isn't necessarily because you're going to need to know Spanish to work with those consulates, but more because, one, a lot of them can help make the appointment for you. So they'll actually, reach out to the consulate directly, or they have specific, depending on the firm, right? Some of these are really large immigration law firms, and they have thousands of clients. So they have a special relationship with that consulate, and they can get you an appointment in ways that maybe you wouldn't be able to do on your own. So that would be the reason for hiring a facilitator to help you on the US side. Now, the bulk of what the facilitator does for you is on the Mexican side, from either getting you the appointment at INM to making sure that your FMM is done correctly when you cross the border, to making sure that you bring the right documentation. If you're doing like family unification, then you need to bring, an apostilled marriage certificate. Some things may need to be translated. So things like that, they'll help you gather before you actually show up in Mexico to ensure that you don't have to one, spend more money getting those documents while you're in Mexico, and two, spend time, right, trying to fix a problem. So I hope that helps you out. And yeah, if you're interested in that, we have a directory of contacts in our complete Mexico relocation guide. I'm gonna put this in the comments for you guys. I'm also gonna put the residency visa article. Have access to that. Oh, good. I'm glad the sound is great this time, you guys. I finally figured it out. The microphone I had was just terrible, and I had some settings wrong on my end, so I'm glad it sounds much better. Thank you. Thank you so much for being so patient. All right, let's see. This is a really good question, Andres. Thank you so much for asking it. What are the average fees for a lawyer in Mexico to get us through the process of temporary and permanent residency? By the way, I should mention that you do not need an immigration lawyer, right, to help you with your residency process. A facilitator is good enough, especially if you have a pretty simple case where you're going in through economic solvency, you're not looking for asylum, you're not doing anything that requires you to have an immigration lawyer. That's where you have, right, a facilitator is excellent for you, which the bulk of you will just need a facilitator. So just making that clarification, because I think sometimes people think lawyer and they think like thousands of dollars, and a facilitator should not charge you thousands of dollars unless they are paying all immigration fees for you as well. But usually the price they give you includes their services, whether they're making an appointment for you at the consulate abroad, or what, depending on what they're doing, whether it's just you, whether it's you and a family member, whether it's you and four family members. So just depending on the workload is what they will charge you. Having said that, an immigration facilitator, each one of them works independently. They set their own prices, but you can expect to pay anywhere between $300, which is about 6,000 pesos, up to $800, depending on what it is exactly that they're doing for you. Some lawyers charge more because they have uh, more demand, right? So to be able to even out their workload. That's why they charge more. It's not because they're doing a lot more. And sorry, I used the word lawyers. Some facilitators charge more just because of that. So just it depends. And I would make sure that when you hire somebody that you ask them exactly what they're going to do for you. Like ask them to walk you exactly through the process of what they will do for you. That way you know exactly what you're paying for, and later on when you get to Mexico, if you need to get any copies or things like that, that you know who's going to be paying for all of that. Whether it's them or whether it's you. Not that copies are expensive, but just so that there's no surprises and you don't feel like you're being taken advantage of in any way. The other thing I would like to mention is some facilitators offer consultations, right? Some of them will get on the phone with you and tell you exactly what to do from point A to point B and walk you through the process. And obviously, they charge a lot less for that. But if you want somebody to help, I mean, you can't call them when you're in line at INM and the INM agent is asking you something, and you don't know what they're asking you for, and you can't call the facilitator at that point. They just told you what to do, but they can't be there to help clarify things for you. Another reason why I think it's important to have somebody with you as opposed to not that a consultation is bad. I think a consultation is a good first step, but I still would recommend hiring one to like be there with you. And the reason for that is sometimes it's the same immigration employees that give you bad information, either because they're not properly trained or because unfortunately they're overworked and they just don't want to deal with you. I hate to say that, but sometimes it's true. Or because they truly just don't know and they're giving you bad information that could potentially cost you your residency. So you want to make sure that you have somebody on your side. I'm not saying that happens all the time. It's rare, but it has happened. It has happened to our customers where an immigration agent told them, "Oh yeah, just you can leave and no problem at all." Didn't tell them anything about the exit reentry permit, and if had they not checked with their immigration facilitator, they would have ended up losing their residency. So anyway, just keep that in mind. All right. So yeah, facilitators. I think that's a great question. Like um, like how much they charge, what questions you should ask them. Oh, this is a good one. So, as of like September, August of 2022, traditionally you would go through the airport and you would be given an FMM, right? Which is again that form that you get that's for multiple reasons, whether you're coming in as a tourist or you're coming in to do canje. And as of, earlier this fall, they started doing away with those. So most international airports now have an electronic FMM. So even if your airline gives you a paper to fill out, you might get to the immigration counter and they might tell you like, we don't need that, right? Just give me your passport, tell me why you're coming. They might do like a brief interview on why you're there, what's the reason for your visit, where you're going to be staying, how long you're going to be staying, things like that. So don't be alarmed. They're just, they're doing their job and finding out who's coming into Mexico and why you're there. And then you will get your passport stamped. So before you leave that immigration area, make sure, please, that your passport is stamped as canje and that 30 days has been written in it. You will also be asked to fill out a form online, which will then generate your electronic FMM. And that electronic FMM needs to be printed and brought to your INM appointment for canje, because unfortunately they don't take digital copies. So it's kind of counterproductive, but that's the way it is right now. For those of you that are traveling and coming in as tourists, and you can use that digital FMM along with your passport to prove that you have permission to be in the country. And that FMM, if you're coming in as a tourist, tells you exactly how much time you have to stay in the country. Right now, most international airports are giving 180 days to tourists coming in, although that can change at any given time. And for canje, you have to make sure it's 30 days. Another tip that we've learned the hard way with these new programs and anything new that the immigration or Mexican government releases is that there's always hiccups at the beginning. And one of those hiccups was people coming in together as a couple. I don't think this is happening very often anymore. In fact, I know it's not happening very often. But it was happening at the beginning that people who were coming in as a couple, one of them would get registered, the other one would not. So when they went to do their canje, one of them would not be able to be found in the system, and the other one was able to do it no problem at all. So my biggest advice, if you're coming in as a couple, I would say each one of you come in independently, right? Like give each other space when you're in immigration, and one of you go into one immigration agent and the other one go to a different immigration agent. That way you can avoid immigration accidentally not registering one of you, which was happening, and that is a problem. So hopefully that helps. All right, I'm going to take a few more questions. John William Young, thanks for being here. Do retirees with Social Security and or pensions need to meet financial solvency? Yes, if you have no ties to Mexico, either through a Mexican national, because you are married to a Mexican national, for example, then yes, the most common way to get residency is through economic solvency. There are other residencies available, like if you're a student, if you're going to be adopting, if you're going to be uh, employed, right? Your employer can petition you. There are investment residencies. There are a variety of other residencies, but the majority of you will qualify under economic solvency. And yes, even retirees and people who only earn Social Security and or a pension need to meet the financial solvency. I did mention I was going to cover the special regularization program. So there is a special program in Mexico that if you qualify for, I absolutely think you should take advantage of. It's a game changer for a lot of people, and it's a special residency, a special temporary residency that is given to you for 4 years up front. So you don't have to renew. You get it for 4 years up front. You do have to pay for those 4 years up front, which comes out to about 14,000 pesos, which is about $700, depending on the exchange rate. And to know if you qualified, you have to have visited Mexico. Depending, again, it depends on which INM office you go to. Most INM offices, you have to have visited Mexico between 2015 and 2019. Some INM offices, they're okay with you visiting between 2015 and even 2021. But for the most part, it's anytime between 2015 and 2019. If you travel to Mexico between 2015 and 2019 and you got a stamp on your passport or an FMM, then you have proof that you entered Mexico. If you drove across and you didn't stop at immigration, you didn't register your entrance with immigration, they have no way of knowing that you came to Mexico. But if you did and you have a way to prove it, then you qualify. The other thing you have to remember is you have to be in Mexico to qualify for this, and you have to be on an expired FMM. So you have to have visited at least once before, and then you need to visit again and wait for that FMM to expire. For a lot of people, it's not feasible because, usually FMMs are given for 180 days, and some people don't want to wait for those 180 days to be up to be able to qualify for temporary residency, which you do have to wait for those 180 days. So just keep it in mind. I do think that if you're on the border and you have visited before, you could easily go get an FMM, go back and that FMM is good for 180 days. You could come back to Mexico, assuming the program is still available in 2023, which we are pretty certain it will be. There's word in the street that they're doing away with it, but I haven't actually seen anything regarding that. And they said the same thing last year, and it's still going on this year. So long story short, you get a temporary residency for 4 years without having to prove financial solvency. So if you visited Mexico in that time frame and you can come in and wait for your FMM to expire, then you basically get a 4-year temporary residency. It's amazing. You should take advantage of that solution if you qualify for it. And Mexico is basically just trying to entice people, or not entice, but maybe promote people who have been staying in Mexico illegally to finally legalize their stay. So yeah, definitely take advantage of that. The way for you to know if you qualify, by the way, is you do have to go to INM and find that out personally, which an immigration facilitator can help you do. Yeah, Merida is fast, but get a facilitator because people are lining up at about 11 p.m. for appointments the next day. Yeah, it's crazy. It really is crazy. Oh, that's so cold, Wilfredo. 15 degrees in Arlington. Jeez. Yeah, it's crazy, right? These patterns and weather changes. Taffy, thanks so much for being here. Would you have any suggestions for a place that I could live where I may find more English speaking people and lower elevations? Yeah, there's a lot of them, right? Like Playa del Carmen, Rosarito, Ensenada. There's also Puerto Vallarta, which is probably a very, very popular one. I think the beach areas would be your best bet. So look at the beach areas that are commonly talked about. Mazatlan is another one, although Mazatlan I do think is traditionally more Mexican, right? Like you'll find less of an expat community. There is some expats there, but they're not all like concentrated in one area. Um, so yeah, I think that would be a good option for you. For those of you who do have like heart conditions or problems breathing in higher elevation areas, well, the Lake Chapala area is about 5,000 to 6,000 feet in elevation. So for some people, that is a problem, like where you have high blood pressure, things like that, and you can't live in higher elevation areas. What is canje? Thanks for asking this, Robert. Canje is when you start the residency process, you get pre-approved in your Mexican consulate. 99% of you will go that route. And then when you get that pre-approval, you get a stamp in your passport, which gives you up to 180 days to then exchange that stamp for an actual card, which is known as canje. So that's what canje is. It's just basically, canje in Spanish means like exchange. So it's just exchanging the residency stamp for the card. Hi, Jim. I'm under 60 and looking at going permanent residency, possibly at the Atlanta Consulate or Indianapolis. Is there an easy way to know if they would consider someone under 60 for permanent? Yeah, I would say apply. Um, if you're going for permanent because you don't want to renew and it's just like the most sure way to have that residency without you having to worry about, all the things that I talked about temporary, right? Like possibly having to show financial statements, possibly having to, do different things because you have to change from temporary to permanent in the future, and who knows what 4 years down the line will bring. Then yeah, I would say apply for permanent if you definitely qualify. If you're not over 60 or you're not 60, it's not like a guaranteed, it's not a written rule anywhere, by the way, that they say that they will not give you permanent. It's just kind of an insider's knowledge, that all the facilitators that we work with and a lot of our customers have been told, right, when they go get their residency. And we assume it's because the consulate thinks of permanent residency as indefinite, and they want to make sure that you're going to have some sort of income available to you, even though you're moving to Mexico indefinitely. So that's why we think they ask for these things for permanent. I would say reach out to the Atlanta consulate. I think they're pretty good about answering to their customers. And if you go to the Atlanta consulate website, you can just Google consulate, Mexican consulate Atlanta, go to their site, look under services to non-Mexicans or services to foreigners. Sometimes they word it differently. Look under visas and see if they have an email address listed where you can reach out. Sometimes they have a phone number where you can reach out. Otherwise, look under the directory and then try to see if there's anybody specifically that you should be reaching out to for visas, because they have a directory usually on the consulate. But reaching out to one of those consulates is really the only way to know if they'll allow you to qualify. And you also have to keep in mind that sometimes it may be better not to lead the witness. If you ask the consulate, like, hey, I'm not over 60 yet, but I want to know if you qualify, like they might not even have that rule in place, but just because you asked a question, they might tell you no. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is sometimes. So I would say, ask them, and maybe, don't use that email address to schedule your appointment so that it's not like directly tied to you. I don't want to, I don't know. It's up to you, but I would say just reach out to them directly to get the absolute surefire answer. And usually that's how it is at most consulates, just from our experience. Paul, do both spouses have to show $50,000 in savings? No, it depends on the consulate. Not all consulates require this. And by the way, it's either or. So you either have to show income, uh, monthly income in the last, and they ask for 6 months of statements to show that monthly income, and or they ask for 12 months of savings or investments. It depends on the consulate. Some consulates will only ask for one of you to bring, the savings amount or the investments amount, and then the additional spouse needs to only show like $1,000 extra for the year, right? If you're going the investments route. If you're going the income route, then they normally ask for $1,000 extra a spouse, if they're not asking for both of you to qualify. In 2022, it was a very, very common thing for most consulates to want both people to qualify. And not all of them, but there was a lot of consulates that were asking both people to qualify. So in 2023, they might lax that rule. I will try to find out as much information as I can for you, and try to give you guys as much information in future live streams. I guarantee it. Tony, I've seen you ask this question several times. I don't want to ignore it, but I think you have to either ask Laura and Ernesto for reviews from previous customers, because I've seen you ask a question and nobody has chimed in, so they haven't hired these people, and I think you should ask them for reviews from their customers. That would be my advice to you. They're not one of these facilitators that like promotes themselves on all the expat groups, so you probably won't get anybody reply to you. They are somebody that I found, that one of our customers had used, and they were very happy with them. So just FYI, you might want to ask them for reviews. Oh, that's awesome, Bonnie. Just came back from McAllen and received my temporary visa. I live in Denver and did not qualify at Denver. It was very easy and smooth. Thank you for giving me such good advice. That's awesome. Congratulations. Yeah, McAllen is what we're seeing right now, and I reached out to them directly. Although I'm trying not to reach out to too many consulates before 2023 because I don't want to use up my email too much and then them not want to answer my questions in 2023. So I'm going to reach out in 2023. But I did reach out to McAllen because there was this rumor circulating that they had increased their income requirements from 1725 to $2,600, and it's true. They replied and said, we don't have any more appointments for 2022. We're scheduling for 2023, and the income requirements are 2593 something a month for temporary residency, which just rounded up to 2,600. And it's always net. So if a lot of you guys ask, like, how will they know if it's net or gross? Well, most consulates will want to see bank statements. So they want to see actual money in the bank and actual liquid money, liquid assets. So just know that that's how they usually verify whether you have those funds or not. So congratulations, first of all, for getting your residency. But for some of you who are thinking like 3,000 might be too much for me, and I don't know if I qualify, well, McAllen is still kind of like, we hope that they keep their income requirements low. And so far, I think they will, although they did go up from 2022. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you guys have a very, very happy holiday. Merry Christmas, Feliz Navidad, Feliz Año Nuevo. I'm so thankful for all of you. I hope these live streams are helpful. Please, please, if you have not signed up for the newsletter, do it, because that's where you find out about these live streams. So, and I try to let you guys know a few days or the day of at least of these live streams. And then I also share a lot of information in this newsletter. I share, as soon as I know of a change in residency or in FMMs or in a process that might affect you, I send an email out about it. So that's really the best way for you to find out about that information as soon as we know about it. So sign up for it, and I'll let you know when the next live stream is, and then also you'll know through those emails what income information I find out. So I hope you guys have a good holiday, and thank you guys so much for being here. I will see you guys in 2023. Thank you so much for being here. Nos vemos.